Today's workshop is Understanding and Building Youth Resilience. I'm excited to introduce you to Kheya Ganguly, Director of Trauma Prevention and Resilience Development at the Vermont Department of Mental Health. Kheya has experience in higher education working as a writing tutor, academic advisor, dissertation consultant, financial aid and scholarship consultant, as well as experience teaching undergraduate courses in counseling and human development. Kheya has also worked as a school psychologist, crisis worker, grant writer, and in community mental health. Most of Kheya's career has been focused on work with children, youth, and families. Welcome, Kheya. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I will turn things over to you. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm looking forward to talking with you today. I will let you know I have a ton of information, so I will probably be talking at you, so I'm going to apologize for that right now. If you have a question, I will try to pause every couple slides and leave some time at the end for questions or comments, but feel free to put questions in the chat. I know people are monitoring the chat and they can always let me know if you have something you want to share or ask about. Let me share my screen and we will get started. There we go. So we're going to be talking about resilience and youth today and what's going on and how we can work with families and children or how we function as families with children. So let's talk a little bit about resilience. The first thing I want to say is understand that these past 3 years have been a lot. We've all experienced a good deal of trauma. We've been through a pandemic that never seems to end. We've seen Supreme Court decisions. We've seen civil rights movements, an uptick in mass shootings and armed unrest, international war and violence, and they are normal stresses of life, whether they be good or bad, a new family member, a marriage, a move, new job, relationships end. I don't know about you, but any one of the big things I mentioned would have been a lot. When you put them all together, understand that as adults, we are all experiencing trauma and trying to build our own resilience. And it's important that we think about that because, like they say, when you're in an airplane, you need to put your oxygen mask on first before you can help somebody else. And I think that's really applicable in these situations. So the first thing I want to talk a little bit about, this is a great image of who we are as people. For some of us, as adults, we have personal circumstances that affect us. We have a life story that affects who we are. We may have work-related traumatic grief or loss going on. We may have had direct exposure to trauma or indirect trauma where we've witnessed other people's trauma. Empathic strain, which I call my give a care is broken, which is really hard for people when you're used to being a compassionate, kind person and you feel like you have nothing to offer someone else. We're living with systems around us that seem to fail. Working conditions have been definitely very changed since the pandemic started. And then the socio-cultural context in which we live, the list of trauma and events that have happened. So understand all of these things are affecting you, and some of these are affecting children and youth. They may not be working, but their school conditions certainly have changed. So each one of these things is going to affect how resilient you feel or how resilient they feel. SAMHSA released a Venn diagram that talks about the 8 dimensions of wellness. And these are areas that we should think about when we're thinking about ourselves or other people. We have emotional wellness, financial wellness, social, spiritual. I know we don't talk a lot about that, but I'm not talking religion when I say spiritual. I really mean it in the sense that definition is expanding our sense of purpose and meaning in life. Occupational, what you do for work, your physical, this is the shake your finger, have you exercised, had 8 glasses of water, are you eating right, are you sleeping right? Intellectual, your own creative abilities and your knowledge, what's going on in your environment. So all of these things will also come in to affect how resilient you may be feeling and how you process trauma. And no one is perfect in any one of these dimensions, okay? We all have places where we feel challenged. So just understand that you don't need to be super strong and, Superman or whatever in each of these dimensions. They're just things to think about, and they're important to note. If there's a challenge in one of these areas, how can you get help or help yourself to feel better? And one of the big things that we need to think about is, what is resilience? How would you define resilience? Because here's what I will tell you is there's lots of definitions. My overall definition is a capacity to thrive individually and collectively in the face of adversity. And I'll tell you really honestly, I don't love the term resilience because there's an implication in order to have it, you've had to go through something bad. And my personal view of the world would be, I want everyone to just not have trauma. Wouldn't that be nice that we could all feel good? But the reality is we need to have the ability to move forward after bad things happen or after challenges happen. One of the things that I like about my definition is I talk about adversity, because there is a difference, in my opinion, between trauma and adversity. Adversity could be difficult or challenging things happen. That doesn't mean that you're going to experience trauma because of that thing, because everyone reacts a little differently. So what might be traumatic for one person might not be traumatic for another. But it acknowledges that adversity is something we may all face. So one of the parts of my job is to define what it means to be resilient. And we did a statewide study on what people thought should be the definition. And based on those answers, we built up a new definition. So what people generally think of when they hear the word resilient is that old idea of you must pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It focuses on the idea that resilience is something an individual does. It is deficit-based because we're really focusing on what was trauma, what was wrong, what do we need to do to make you be resilient? How do we help that? Many people think it's a mental health issue, which it can be, at least partially. It's also focused primarily on early childhood. I'm sure you've all heard many, many times, oh, kids are resilient. They'll be okay. Well, I think COVID has showed us that kids are not as resilient as people think, and that they do need some support. And like I said, people think it's reliant on an individual. The way I look at resilience and the way I'd like you to think about it is that resilience is based in the context and system in which you live. So if you live as a person of color in Vermont, like I am, there's a different context for me. I face daily microaggressions. I face things happening because of my color, and that affects my resilience and how I look at the world. We want to look at people's strengths. I have yet to find a way to focus on someone's challenges and make a difference. What I have found is if I focus on someone's strengths to address a challenge, we can make a difference. So it's not ignoring the challenge, it's figuring out how to address it. I would like resilience to be a universal concern. Not that we just think, oh, it's mental health, they can take care of it. I personally believe we need everyone working on this together in order to create a more resilient society. The other piece is it should be inclusive across the lifespan. You can develop resilience at any age. You can lose resilience at any age. It's more than just early childhood. And finally, I really want us to have a shared belief on resilience and how we can help not just people, but communities be more resilient. I don't want us to sit there and say it's the responsibility of the individual, especially because we know from what research says, if you look at things on a community level and make changes on a community level, one, the change is more lasting, and two, you'll affect more people and more people will be resilient. Now, here's one of the things I want to talk about is resilience is often grouped with the term bounce back. And I want to challenge that idea because it's an inherently conservative one, which is that we're going backwards. I don't know about you, but I don't want to go backwards. I want to go forward. I don't want to move back into the past or move back into what I considered was an appropriate time or place because it doesn't help me grow. You know, growth we think of as something that makes us get taller or move forward. And we really need to look at who's making these decisions when it comes to resilience and make sure that we are all thinking about this together and not having one person decide. I like to think of us as bouncing forward, if we want to use the term bounce. We want to move into new ways of doing and new ways of thinking and new ways of moving through the world that will help us be stronger. It's really, really interesting to think about things like evolution or how we change through time. Adaptation is the idea came from that, how we adapt to our environment. And I think we could think of resilience as that too. How do we adapt to what is going on around us? So that's the idea I want you to hold when you're thinking about resilience and you're thinking about youth or you're thinking about yourself. So do we have any questions or comments up to this point? You're free to raise your hand or put a comment in the chat. Okay. So what do we know right now? Okay, so Cigna Resilience Index was developed in partnership with the Resilience Research Center, and it studied responses from two groups. They had a school-aged and university-aged group, so some, aged and still involved in education, and then they had a group of workers who were 18 or over. So the study found that resilience is at risk for 60% of Americans. Younger kids between the ages of 11 and 13 had a sharp drop in resilience that lasted till 23. And we know that people are least resilient between 18 and 23. So what do you think happens between 11 and 13 that causes this drop in resilience? And you're welcome to unmute yourself or type something in the chat. Puberty, that's one thing. What else happens? All right, I will give you the answer. Middle school. Middle school is hell. It really is for a lot of kids. It's a really challenging period of time where they go from a very safe and protective environment in their elementary schools, where they know everybody. The school is smaller. They have seen like the same cafeteria workers and janitors and support staff for 4 or 5 years. And they suddenly go into this huge school with people they don't know, new responsibilities, they're forced to change classes. They suddenly have choices and decisions and more freedom, and all of it hits at once. And then puberty stops on top of it. And at this point, kids are also, not that they haven't before, but they may be also dealing with issues of gender identity, of sexuality, of, growing up. It really is a sharp change for youth. And then people are least resilient between 18 and 23. What do you think happens between what's going on at 18? I mean, think back to when you were 18. What was going on then? Absolutely. Coming of age. That's a great way to put it. Graduation, transitions, next stages in life. Yeah, think about this. At 18, with a difference of one day, you're suddenly an adult. Finishing school, you're right. Starting college, maybe trying to develop a career. You're expected to know suddenly what you want to be when you grow up. Typos are fine. I do it all the time. But there's this huge shift in thinking from one day you're a child to the next day you're an adult. But at the same time, those of us who work in the field know that your brain is still developing. So you're suddenly expected to take on all these responsibilities and make all of these decisions, and your brain's not even done growing. That starts solidifying around 25. So of course, people are least resilient because they are taking on things that they may not be prepared. In fact, we know they're not prepared for. In addition, what we found in this study was among full-time workers, only 37% were considered to be highly resistant. What does that mean, resilient? Well, this happened during COVID. This study occurred then. So people were really struggling, and it was showing up. And people who worked part-time or laid off had even lower levels. So understand, resilience is not something that it's not like a present that you keep and get. It can ebb and flow throughout your lifetime. You can grow in resilience, but you can also lose resilience. So if you think about this, one of the things we need to know is mental health challenges among children, adolescents, and young adults are real. They're widespread, even before the pandemic. Many young people struggled with feelings of hopelessness, depression, thoughts of suicide. And the rates have just increased over the past decade. And then COVID-19 has even altered youth experience at home, in school, in the community, and the effect has been devastating. Because understand, even when our kids love us and enjoy our company, part of the work of young adulthood is to separate from your family, is to start putting your peer group more in the forefront, is to start creating your own life and independence. And for many youth, COVID short-circuited that. Kids couldn't socialize outside the home. They had, they're on the internet maybe if they had some time. They were suddenly unable to leave or go anywhere, and for lack of a better term, stuck with their parents. And even if you have a good relationship, that can be really challenging when your stage of life is, I must be moving forward. So understand, before COVID-19, mental health challenges were the leading cause of disability and poor outcomes, life outcomes in young people. Up to 1 in 5 children between the ages of 3 and 17 in the US have a mental, emotional, developmental, or behavioral disorder. Okay. In addition, between 2009 and 2019, the share of high school students who said they had persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness increased by 40%. So 1 in 3 of our youth are expressing these feelings. The other piece that is really concerning is suicidal behaviors among high school students increased during that decade preceding COVID. 19% of youth seriously considered suicide. It was a 36% increase from 2009 to 2019. And 16% made a suicide plan in the prior year, which was a 44% increase. So understand the rates of suicide for youth between 10 and 24 in the US increased 57%. And the early estimates that we have so far showed that 6,600 suicide deaths happened in this group in 2020. In addition, if you start digging into these rates, the fastest growing population of kids who are struggling with suicidality are Black youth. It's our fastest growing population. So understand that this is urgent. Resilience and understanding resilience is one of, I think, the tasks that really lie before us. So how do we start thinking about this? Okay. This is a model that Head Start uses. It's also a model I was trained in, and I think it helps us understand what's going on with kids. At the center of this system is the individual or the child. Directly around that child is the Bronfenbrenner, who created this model, called the microsystem. Okay, the microsystem really focuses on what is directly daily around this child in the home. This is the layer that's closest to the kid and where they have direct income. So it's the relationships and interactions they have with family, school, neighborhood, childcare environment. Okay, these relationships have the strongest impact on the child. And this can be nurturing or it cannot be nurturing, which is why we may see some real challenges. Outside of the microsystem is the mesosystem. This moves into systems. When you look at the microsystem, you're really starting to look at like individual relationships. Like, what is that child's relationship with their teacher? What's the child's relationship with the friend? When you get into the mesosystem, you start looking at like, what is the child's teacher and his parents' relationship? And how does that affect him? How do his siblings interact with their peers? And how does that affect the child? So you're looking at the same things, but you're looking a little more broadly. Then you get into the exosystem. It's the larger social system where the child doesn't directly function, but it can affect the child indirectly. So this would be extended family they don't see every day, their wider neighborhood, media that's around them, their parents' work environment, because anyone that tells you that they don't bring work home is lying to you, because that always affects people. And then finally, we have the macro system, and that is the larger world and society. We're looking at things like the cultural context in which you live, the social conditions, the laws, the economy, culture, history. These all nest within each other to affect a youth or a child. And when we make changes in one part of the system, it will affect the other inner parts of the system. So for us, when we're starting to think about building resilience, we need to think on it in a bunch of levels. We need to think of, okay, when I'm working directly with a child, what can I do? When I'm working with myself, what can I do? How do I change my neighborhood? How do I change society? And there's some big questions involved here that are really important to think about. and that we're going to discuss as we go on. So questions about this are up to this point. We've defined resilience. We've understood that's at risk. We've covered a theory that talks about what's around the child and all the different things that we can affect in order to affect resilience. Okay.
Hey, I just wanted to note that there was an earlier comment that this was really great information.
Oh,
So
well, thank
I
you.
wanted to make sure you knew that.
Thank you, Diane, and thank you for whoever made the information, the comment. So what can we do? Now that I've depressed everybody about how bad things are, let's start about what can we do? Okay, first of all, we need to recognize that mental health is an essential part of overall health. So while it's not the only thing that affects resilience, it's one of the things that we often shove to the side, or one of the things we don't address in different communities. For example, if you're looking at immigrant communities, I happen to be an immigrant, and it's one of those things, it's considered shameful. You push that to the side, you don't look at it, rather than understand that's an essential part of who we are. We want to empower youth and families to recognize, manage, and learn from emotions that are challenging. We want to ensure that every child has access to high quality, culturally competent mental health care, school care, communities. We really want to know that like after school care is high quality, that it's affordable, that it's culturally competent. We want to make sure that we're supporting the mental health of children and youth in all settings. And when I say children and youth, that includes their families, because if their families aren't supported, they're not going to be supported. We, of course, want to expand and support the early childhood and education workforce. We know that this is a struggle for many people right now. We want to address economic and social barriers that contribute to poor health and increase data collection and research to identify and respond to youth mental health needs more rapidly. So if you notice, we're starting from the micro and we went to the macro. So in other words, we're starting to look at, okay, the individual, we need to know that their mental health is important. Now we're going to look and say, okay, we need to look a little bit larger. How do we teach you? And we can keep continuing onwards to make sure that we're looking at resilience and youth growth from a very, very wide lens. So what are some core principles to think about when we're trying to build strength for people? We want to make sure that we have mutually respectful relationships between youth and family, between family and the youth teachers, the community, the church, whatever they are. We want to make sure that those relationships are there. We want to understand stress and trauma. And I haven't focused on that today simply because I'm really trying to focus on resilience and some of the other things, but understand that we all have stress, and stress affects us, and trauma affects us. And asking for help to deal with that is not a weakness or a challenge. You need to learn about privilege and oppression. And why do we want to learn that? Because we need to understand how it affects families. For some families who may be held down or denied access, they may face prejudice, discrimination, racism. We want families to feel safe, supported, and seen. So these are all things that would be really good if you don't know a lot about to start asking questions about. We want to message safety and predictability, especially for youth. You know, we want to let them know verbally and also through written means, movies, whatever we want to use, that safety is a primary concern. Predictability is another thing that's really important. Being consistent and having routines and understanding that for youth, even no matter how they may argue about rules, having that safety around and that predictability helps increase their resilience. We want to focus on strengths because all people have them. what we want to do is turn challenges on their heads and use the strength to address challenges. And things that could be strengths could be everything from social capital of a family, aspirations that a youth might have. Maybe there's a linguistic strength, or the family is super tight, or they have lots of social connections. There's a lot of different ways to look at strengths and assets. And part of it is really looking, again, beyond the child to what's around the child. Here's a big one, the opportunity for agency and control. The more we can offer youth and kids a chance to practice agency and control over their situation, the more resilience we will build. One, because they feel like they're important and they're included, but two, the only way you learn to do something in the end is by practicing. And if you don't give youth a chance to practice agency or the ability to affect change on their environment or control of a situation, the more you're chipping away at resilience. And then we want to promote coping strategies, resilience building activities, and healing. Here's the thing I will tell you about resilience that people don't think. When we talk about resilience, we often think about that means that people are strong and they're moving forward and they can do this and they've overcome. Those are words that are used frequently. I would like you to think about this idea. Just because you're resilient, it doesn't mean that you don't have scars, that you don't have bruises, that you don't have places that are still challenging for you and that may always be challenging. What it means is you've accepted yourself for who you are and you've learned to navigate the world and keep moving with those challenges going with you, and that you're not ashamed of them, and that you're tender with yourself. So that's always something to consider, because think of this, 67% of adults have experienced at least one trauma before the age of 18. So this is something that applies to us as adults, as well as the youth that we're working with or that we're family to. So things that will increase resilience on an individual level: emotional regulation. So learning how to identify and regulate emotions. There is no bad emotion. That's one of the things kids really start thinking, oh, if I'm angry, that's bad. If I'm sad, that's bad. I think what's more important to teach kids is that, yes, it's okay to be angry. It's what you do with your anger. How do you express it? What are ways you let people know? So being able to regulate and understand when and how to express emotions is really important and helps increase resilience. The perception of control and ability to impact one's life. So as a psychologist, we talk about locus of control. Do you believe it's internal or external? Someone who has an internal locus of control believes that they can affect the world around them, that they can make change, that they can make choices, versus an external means the world acts on them and they have no power. A good example would be a kid who takes a test. A kid with an external locus of control who receives a bad grade would say, geez, my luck deserted me today. There was nothing I could do. Versus a kid who looks at that grade and says, I need to study harder for my next test because I know I can do better. Self-esteem and self-efficacy, again, the same thing, but applied even more inward. How do you feel about yourself? And how do you feel about your ability to affect the world? The higher these are, while being realistic, the more resilient a kid is, or an adult. Here's a big one: the ability to dream or have a sense of purpose. I don't care what your age is, you can have a sense of purpose and you can have dreams. Think about how often we ask little kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? Okay, part of that is having a sense of purpose and dreaming. Social skills and communication skills. These are two areas that got really hit during COVID. What I tell teachers a lot of times when I talk to them, when we had kids returning, is you are now dealing, let's say you're a ninth grade teacher, you're actually dealing with the seventh grader. So they've lost 2 years of social emotional learning. So the expectations need to change. So this is an area that's really important and has been really hit. So explicitly teaching them. A lot of times we assume kids just sort of pick this up and we don't actually teach social skills. How do you start a conversation? Communication skills. How do you express yourself? Empathy, really helping kids feel for others. Giving kids an opportunity to volunteer, for example, hits a bunch of these areas. A sense of humor. We don't talk about that a lot, but it's really important. Being able to laugh when things are hard help people move forward. It helps build resilience. I know there are times in my life where I've just been like, if one more thing falls on my head, I think I'm just going to be done. And then I just start laughing. It's so ridiculous that there's nothing else I could do. And then a sense of physical well-being. That does not mean you can bench press 150 pounds. What that means is within your own body and what your body can do, how well do you feel? What do I mean by that? For example, I have rheumatoid arthritis. I can't do certain things. But within those limitations, I feel pretty good because I know what I can and can't do. I did see the question around curriculum, and really honestly, there are so many out there that I'm not comfortable recommending one over another. What I will say is I know the school systems have been really investing in identifying really good and really appropriate systems to use within the school setting. So I would recommend talking to the Agency of Education. And I will see if I can find a couple recommendations from them and send them out. I know because I actually have an email out about that, and I just haven't been able to connect with the person that I want to talk to. But understand in the end, sometimes just having conversations with the kid and being really direct really helps. Other things that increase resilience: community, supportive extended family engagement, a close relationship with a mentor, positive school experience, and safe neighborhoods. So some of this, like I said, are really, really family oriented. Other things like safe neighborhood are much more, let's look at society. Having a close community, having social support, being part of a religious or faith community, and extracurricular activities. So these are all things outside the family that can really help kids build resilience. And for adults, having a close relationship for a mentor also helps you, or having close relationships with friends. And one of the things I'll tell you as an adult is, like for me, a lot of my really close friends don't live anywhere near me. I went to an international high school. I went to school in India. And we had 68 of us in my graduating class, and we're scattered all over the world. But thanks to the wonders of the internet for us, we talk to each other daily. We have a whole WhatsApp group where we're like silly messages, memes, checking in. So you can also use technology to help you connect with your community. So understand, like I said, the big thing that I want you to take away from this is making connections. Socialization with peers, giving kids unstructured time to interact with friends, really looking for mentoring relationships and encouraging kids to have them. And then working with families, and as a family, supporting kids. These are the basis sort of like of the pyramid of a human being that really form resilience. I like this image because it really talks about what are the different things that you can do for youth to help them understand and build resilience. So realistic goal setting, self-esteem, like I said, Learning from mistakes, letting kids know it's okay to make a mistake, because often they don't get that message and they think that the world is ending because they didn't do well or they made an error. And talking with kids about how everyone has strengths and challenges. I'm a really good writer. I'm really good with words. I can't add straight as much as I try. It's a challenge for me. Math is difficult, and I understand that. Self-control, really being able to exercise and be able to understand the difference between I am angry and they made me angry. Because you hear that a lot with kids. Well, so-and-so made me so angry. No, that's the reaction you had. They didn't deliberately do something to make you angry, or maybe they did, but you chose to be angry. Now, you didn't hit them, so you exercise self-control. A willingness to overcome difficulties rather than avoid problems. That's a big one when we're trying to support youth and help them, is to really that willingness to address conflict and problems. Being optimistic, learning to ask for help, and then understanding emotions. These are all areas that you can really work with youth. So let's say we're going to talk about you and kids. How do you deal with, like, in the moment when you are really struggling? Well, our brain has happy chemicals. There are four main brain chemicals: dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins. And they all express a role in how we experience happiness. And experience happiness is part of being resilient. So let's say you're having a bad day and you want some dopamine. You can actually get your brain to release it by completing a task, doing some self-care, celebrating little wins. A really easy example of releasing dopamine is, I'm sure many of you have to-do lists. Every time you scratch something off a to-do list, you're releasing dopamine. On top of it, if you look at your to-do list and you do the one thing on here that you're trying to avoid and you do it first, you're going to release a huge hit of dopamine if you've gotten rid of the one thing you're dreading. Oxytocin, play with a dog, hug a baby, hold someone's hand, give a compliment. And that serves two purposes. I actually, when I was first practicing this, used to write on my to-do list, give compliment. I wrote 3 different times to get into the habit. Every time you give a compliment, you release oxytocin, and you also release oxytocin for the person who gets the compliment. So it serves two people. Serotonin, SSRI uptake inhibitors. Those are the antidepressant drugs. If they help release serotonin, but you can do that naturally by meditating, running, sun exposure. Go outside and be a plant. There's a study that was released last year, and it showed that it analyzed 158 depression studies. And what they found was the best treatment for depression was being outdoors and just getting sun. So understand, this is a huge, powerful thing. The other piece that works with that, because we know we live in Vermont and we know winter comes, full spectrum light. You can get one for like $14. Sit in front of it for 20 minutes a day. My husband has seasonal affective disorder. So I have a summer husband and a winter husband. And the winter husband sits in a chair and grunts at me. So 2 years ago, I got one of these lights and I said, would you please just sit in front of it? And he's like, this isn't going to do anything. I'm like, please, just for me. So he did. Day 1 passed. Day 2 passed. Day 4 passed. Suddenly, my summer husband appeared in February. It was amazing. It was like a different human being. And now the minute it starts getting darker, he pulls it out himself. And then endorphins, laughing, watching a comedy, dark chocolate. Who does not like dark chocolate? So any of these can really help you use your own body to make yourself feel better. Now, when you're working with youth or kids, and they are really stressing out, and you're trying to help them, one of the things you can do is what I call a bottom-up approach, using patterned, repetitive, somatosensory activities, rocking back and forth, walking, running, swimming, jumping, repeatedly petting an animal, listening to music, humming, deep breathing, musical instruments and drumming, anything that's repetitive and makes the body move in a repetitive manner can help a youth recenter themselves, but also build resilience. It gives them something to do that will help them regain control, which is what we want to see. If you want to do a top-down approach, what we want to do is using thoughts to regulate and calm themselves. So maybe think of people who they know that are calm or grounders. Sitting down and mapping out solutions for challenges, repeating affirmations, and listening to yourself talk. You know, I've always found it really useful to ask kids, how do you talk to yourself in your head? And helping them reframe that. Other ways to reframe resilience. We went over this, but it's not, I can't say enough about. Make sure we're looking at emotional regulation and some of those other pieces. Let me get to this. So coping skills. So these and this one, these three are the basis of everything. So here's the other thing, is we want to encourage child independence and autonomy. So we want to give kids the opportunity to exercise their own ability to affect the world. Use suggestions rather than commands with kids. Could you please, rather than go do. If you see a child needing something or they're melting down, being responsive and being warm and emotionally supportive. We talked about social emotional skills and emotions. Being able to identify emotions is an actual skill you need to teach because kids don't always know. And especially with COVID and being absent from a classroom setting for so long, these are things they may have missed. But letting them know, helping them identify visual cues, teaching that no emotion is bad, and making sure they are practicing and practicing again and again. Teaching them basic problem solving. I mean, breaking it down into how do you analyze a problem? How do you set goals? Come up with solutions. Choose the best solution. Create your plan, implementing, and then reviewing. This entire process really helps kids build resilience because it makes them start thinking about what can I do? What's in my control? Then empowering kids, letting them get involved in youth issues. Helping them problem solve, teaching them tactics and ways to make change in their world. What are things you can do, and helping them get engaged. Find something that they believe in and want to get involved in and let them do that. The more we empower them, the more resilient they become. So I am going to finish up because I know we're running out of time, but we're going to talk about care of self. I know all of you are tired of talking about self-care and being told you need to do X, Y, or Z because it feels like one more thing you have to do. Well, I will tell you that I think self-care and wellness is a $2 billion Instagrammable industry that is very white and very middle class. I am not going to tell you to take a bubble bath. I'm not going to tell you to paint your nails. I'm not going to tell you to take a yoga class. What I'm going to say is self-care is anything you do to take care of yourself so you can stay mentally, emotionally, and physically well. And when you're talking about self-care, you should also be talking about your own culture. Because what makes self-care effective, or like I like to say, care of self, is basing it in who you are and what works for you. So for example, self-care for me. When my sister and I get together, well, let me take a step back. I'm from India. I was born in India. I come from a collectivist culture, which means you put the good of the family or the group ahead of the group, the good of the individual. If you told my mom when I was growing up that she should go and engage in self-care and take care of herself, she would look at you like you've grown a second head. So how's that applied to my self-care and my sister's self-care? Well, we get together, and whenever we get together, we'll put on our scrubbiest clothes, then we will blast music on the Alexa. She will grab every cleaning supply she can find. I will take over the kitchen. And for the next 4 hours, we will yell over the music, we will dance, we will gossip. She will have cleaned the entire place until you could eat off the floor, and I will have cooked enough food for 2 families for a week. And we feel amazing. And that is our form of self-care because we feel re-energized, we feel joyful, we feel happiness. Okay, so self-care should be about filling your cup, but what makes you feel good. And it doesn't need to rely on having time, having money, or having access. It could use some of those things, but doesn't have to. So for us, we've done something that made us feel wonderful, and we've taken care of our families at the same time. And that is what self-care is about for us. So understand that self-care is very different for anyone. Like, I don't get my sister. I have a housekeeper for a reason. I do not like to clean. She loves it. It makes her feel better. So the dimensions of self-care are physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual, and professional care, such as therapy. That's how I look at it. Again, I'm going to tell you, it's okay, and it's important to, eat nutritiously, exercise, all of the other we should do. That is a very medical model. That's not what I call care of self. Okay. Are those things important? Absolutely. Should we do them? Yes. But I'm not talking about that when I talk about care of self in this manner. What I'm talking about is what brings you joy, what makes you feel good, what makes it worth getting up the next day. So understand that mental health is more than the absence of mental illness. It's essential to your overall health and your quality of life. And care of self plays a role in this. And it helps you move forward. It helps you be more resilient. So look for the things that bring you joy. For me, I'm a fabric artist. I knit, I crochet, I like to garden, I like to cook, and I make time for those things. In fact, I didn't even realize that these things were self-care for me until I learned about care of self and that idea of it needs to fit your culture and who you are. Like telling me to go take a yoga class, really? So I have to drive a half an hour to spend $25 to be in a class that I actually find insulting to my religion because I'm Hindu, because the person teaching the class doesn't really know anything about that, to drive another half an hour home. So it's taken me 2 hours and a dent in my bank account to do something that's supposed to make me feel better, and it doesn't. So understand, look for those things that make you happy. Now, I'm going to tell you, you cannot tell me that you don't have 2 minutes in a day. So if you're at work, and this works for kids too, and you feel like your head is about to pop off your shoulders because you are so stressed, these are all things that people have told me can make them feel better. You can take 2 minutes to breathe, stretch, doodle, drink some water, share a joke, spend some time with your pet, say no. And I know it's hard for a lot of people. One of the things I recommend, use your 2 minutes in the morning after you brush your teeth and look at yourself in the mirror for a minute and just practice saying no to yourself. Moment of joy. This is an exercise I recommend to everybody. When you have time, like 5 minutes or so, sit down or go for a walk or whatever you do to quiet your mind. And then I want you to focus inward and think of something small in your life that brings you complete joy. And I want you to think about it in as much detail. What are you sensing? What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you taste? So for me, my moment of joy, which I will share with you, is I wake up early every morning and I go to the kitchen. My partner has set the coffee machine the night before. The coffee's already brewed. My coffee cup is sitting in front because he left it there. I pour myself a cup of coffee, put my hands around this huge mug, and this time of year, I go out back and sit in my garden. And I sit down and I hold that warm cup of coffee and I lean over and I smell and I feel that steam and I take that first sip and I have the same thought every single time. Whatever a human thought picking beans, roasting beans, grinding beans, and then throwing hot water through them to make a beverage to drink was completely amazing. And whenever I am so stressed that I can't think, now that I know what that moment is, I close my eyes, I take a deep breath, and I pull that moment to me. It makes me smile, and I feel like I can focus again. So we found 2 minutes. How about 5? You can listen to music. You can sing out loud. You can jot down dreams. So think about the little moments of time. Finally, I'm going to say shouting self-care at people who need community care is how we fail them. What's community care? It's any kind of care provided by one person to benefit other people. And it's leveraging your own privilege. What are some examples? It might be cooking a meal for a friend. It could be remembering the name of the person who checks your groceries out. It might be knowing that someone in your office just had a baby and setting up a meal train. It's anything you can do to make someone else's life better. And it's creating this whole web of people that support each other and that get validation from each other. We are naturally cooperative. So caring for each other is the best way that I can think of to really, really practice care of self by caring for each other and making sure that people don't get dropped. Thanks, Rachel, for sharing that. So we have 1 minute, so I did pretty well. Are there questions? You can unmute yourself, you can type them in the chat or comments or anything else that you might want.
Kheya, I just want to say thank you so much. This information was incredibly helpful and real and practical.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your doing this workshop for us. It's just very informative.
I will say thank you to you because you're the one who said, I want practical things for people.
Thank you. And to all who joined us today, you'll see a link to the evaluation in chat. And if you could please take a few minutes to complete it so we can make improvements with our workshops and fulfill our grant requirements. I would love to have you back, Kheya. I just want to say this, because this was wonderful. Vermont Family Network has many more workshops that are coming up. Please look at our webpage, vermontfamilynetwork.org. There are links to previously recorded ones. This one will also be posted. We have tons of information, and getting connected with Vermont Family Network is easy. You can follow us on our Facebook page or join our closed Facebook page if you are a parent. We have 2 groups on Facebook that are closed, one for parents of children with disabilities and special health needs, and one for adults specific, or for parents of adult children specifically. You can also sign up for our monthly e-news or check out our YouTube channel. We're here to help. Please contact us by phone or email. Thanks, everyone. And I hope you all have a great day. And thanks, Kheya.
Yep, anytime.
Appreciate it.
Have a wonderful day, everybody.
You too. Thank you, Kheya.